This is another Distoceros indianensis. I have a specimen, one of these up to come up and look at. This is Beloitoceros bucheri, and this is another Beloitoceros adenum. These guys are all from the Saluda in southeast Indiana. There's a limestone layer in Hamburg, Indiana, in Franklin County. It's a massive micritic limestone. It's just loaded with cephalopods. And a lot of these big Distoceros, the Gorbeoceros, the larger Ascosauroids are all in that unit. We called it the concrete layer. And we had a graduate student at Miami who was a rabid fossil collector. Everybody. And he collected this really nice fauna. In fact, that's where this big Endosauroid comes from. This is also from the same concrete layer. The preservation isn't all that great, but you have complete shells. And then finally, the piece de resistance, as far as Nautiloids in the Cincinnati, and everybody wants to find Keratoceros, which is this large, robust, gyroconic quail guy. And again, this is another one of these Arctic Ordovician invaders. Comes in the Liberty Formation and is common in the, well, it's not common, it's uncommon probably in the Whitewater Formation in southeast Indiana and southwest Ohio. Actually, almost all of these specimens of Keratoceros we know of in museums come from one locality north of Oxford, Ohio, that was collected by William Scheidler, I think back in at the turn of the century, where he found a layer that was just loaded with cephalopods. There was probably over 100 of these large Keratoceros. These guys are like Nautilus. I mean, they're this big. Very robust guys. And then he found a bunch of these Distoceros, and again, they were about that big. And then he found this whole plethora of oddball things. And almost all of them are described in Flowers' Bible here, 1946. All of these forms came from one locality and one layer. And we haven't been able to find a lot of these things in any other location or any other strata. Now, it could be that this layer is out there. We just, it's just a layer. If you go above it, you don't find anything. You go below it, you don't find anything. But in this one layer, they found probably almost all of the ones that are in the museums, and a lot of the ones that Firsty, these really nice big guys that Firsty illustrated back in 1924.
Where's that material? Is that still?
That's at the Smithsonian, or U.S. National. And this thing was actually described by Meek and Worthen back in the about 1870s, I think, initially. But the best specimens, again, come from the Oxford area. Okay, folks, we're at the end, or close to it. So we have the Treptoceros Camaraceros fauna, with a few little New Yorkers coming in at the base of the Edenian. Then we have the Treptoceros fauna dominant through most of the Cincinnatian. Things change, the climate changed, the sediments change. We have this Richmond invasion. We get these exotic forms coming in from the north and the west. And then somebody pulled the plug on the ocean, on these cratonic seas. These seas drained away and left everybody high and dry, and they croaked, and they're dead. So that was the end of the Ordovician, of the Cincinnati Nautiloid, or what? What we see is that most Cincinnati Nautiloid taxa, all of the species, and about 73% of the known genera, are extinct by the time you get to the end of the Ordovician. And again, the causations are argued, but it all appears to have something to do with continental glaciation that developed in North Africa or in Gondwana land, what's now North Africa, at the end of the Ordovician. You get a drawdown and retreat of seas from cratonic portions of Laurentia, and then you have some evidence of rapidly fluctuating water temperatures during this time. Nautiloids appear to like things warm. They seem to be mostly a tropical bunch of guys and girls. And we see the greatest development, the greatest diversity and abundance, size and everything in these tropical carbonate platform types of facies. So it makes a certain amount of sense if things got colder that these guys, would suffer. And that's where some interesting things kind of come out. There were some survivors. Treptosaurus. I mean, that guy's every place. And we thought Treptosaurus popped off along with everything else Cincinnati at the end of the Ordovician. Well, in 1893, August Forstey described a couple of species of small longiconic nautiloids from the overlying Brassfield limestone, early Silurian age in the Dayton, Ohio area. One of these species is a form called he gave these things a name called Euorthoceras. And one of these guys was Euorthoceras erraticum. And why is it called erraticum? It's called erraticum because the siphuncle starts out dorsally, and as it grew, it went ventral. And you look at the siphuncle segments, and they change from compressed heart shape to tubular as the animal grows. Well, shoot, that's a Treptosaurus. So it looks like possibly Treptosaurus survived into the overlying Silurian and eventually became extinct, probably between the early and the middle part of the Silurian. But the other big thing is the Arctic Ordovician fauna. Remember, that's the tropical fauna that gets real big and lives out there in the cratonic part of the country. That's where all the water and all the seas retreated. And things got cold. You would have thought these Arctic guys would have got whacked for sure. And if anybody survived, it would be somebody like Treptosaurus. But what we find is that we have this relic Arctic Ordovician fauna: Actinoceras, Armenoceras, Huronia. These are big, large actinoceraoids. Narthecoceras, which is this really oddball thing that has a big siphuncle, another one of these longiconic forms. These things evidently found refugium someplace at the end of the Ordovician, probably in the Arctic, and survived. And what happens is we get into the early Silurian, and you get these carbonate platform facies returning to the area, and who's coming back along with that facies? The Ordovician, Arctic Ordovician fauna, which now evolves into a new fauna that Charlie Holland and I call the Discoceras huronia fauna in the early part of the Silurian. So all the way across the Canada and the Arctic archipelago, you find this relic Ordovician fauna and all of these evolutionary offshoots of this fauna that are represented by a number of new forms. And this fauna dominates these carbonate platform facies through about the middle Silurian, and then they're replaced gradually by a Silurian fauna that's cosmopolitan. It's very similar to things found in Bohemia and found in Gotland in Sweden in the Silurian. So, if temperature changes were significant in terms of causing the end of the Ordovician extinction event, which most people usually think, then why is it that the Ordovician nautiloids that survive are the ones that lived in these tropical carbonate platform environments? And again, the answer must be that there were pockets in this area where tropical conditions continued through the Ordovician-Silurian transition, and where these protonic seas remained. So that's it. I'll answer any kind of questions if anybody's still awake. Specimens up here, I'll put out so you can take a look at it.
Well, what's the significance of the it's bad? I've always associated that with abundant nautiloids. Is that the bed that was the...
It's at the very